right, Laura, we're pumped to talk to you. This is episode 2 of Best Lesson Ever. So if people out there, they're looking for a transition in their career, looking to break loose, based on your experience, what's this big transition or change that they need to make in their life? What's the best lesson ever that you could give them?
Okay, so there is one, and it is so easy, yet it seems so hard for us to really embrace and make the shift, but it's very simple. We have to shift from thinking about the value we create in the organization, from the work that we do. We have to stop thinking about it as outputs and start thinking about it as outcomes. That's the shift. Very simple. Go from outputs to outcomes.
It seems simple, right? Go from just that
Yeah.
words, they seem like concept, but what does it really mean? What did it do for you? Or maybe even first, how did you realize this? Like, what was the genesis that got you to this point?
Yeah. So my background is actually I started in computer science. I have a computer science degree, one of 4 women in my graduating class. But quickly, as I was going through my career, and even in college, I was working full time for the computer science department, working on this big transformational program. You see, we were taking all graduate students who had been doing their theses and dissertations on paper originally, and now they had to do them electronically to graduate. Now, this does date me, right? You know, I look young. I'm not so young. This was way back in the day before like the internet was a big thing. And they couldn't understand why it would be so important to do their theses and dissertations electronically. They had always, they were ready to throw their typewriters at us, right? And so really early on, I got exposed, even when I was doing the technology stuff, to change, big change, and needing to bring people with us through the change process, right? So fast forward in my career, in 1999, I've been doing project management for a while because I found out that was the place that you really got to make magic happen. And that's what I loved. Being a part of big change. It was always very exciting to me. So in 1999, I get to build my first PMO. Now in 1999, you couldn't just Google how to set up a PMO and get 8 million results like you can today, right? So I had to actually, ask my stakeholders what they wanted, what they needed, where their pain points were. Crazy as it sounds. I had to actually ask them what they wanted out of this thing that I didn't even know was called a PMO at the time. But we had all these projects that needed to get done. We were in the middle of the .com insanity, e-commerce for brick and mortar stores, and we were figuring it out as we went along. So every day was a new adventure of figuring out, how are we going to serve today? What are we going to do? How are we going to get it done, right? So fast forward a few years later, I'd done this thing called PMO several times. The internet's now much of a bigger thing. You could search how to set up a PMO online. And the information that I was finding was really heavy on templates, tools, process, go build a PMO charter, and all the things that I would tell people today, do not focus on that stuff first, right? So what happened to me inside organizations is that as I was saying, okay, well, I know what the PMO is supposed to do. That's what all the books are telling me. And this is what the classes are saying. This is what I'm finding online. Don't worry. I know what's good for you. I know the medicine you need to take. And it was this very templates, tools, and process first mindset. And when that happened, my PMOs started struggling. People were running in the other direction. They weren't interested in being a part of the PMO. They felt like it was hard, heavy, administrative. Anyone ever been called administrative overhead as a project manager, PMO leader? We deal with that all the time. Well, it's because there was this push for so much focus on the outputs, the deliverables we were creating, the outputs we were creating, the stuff, right? And that's where we were being told our value was tied, is into the stuff we were creating. And the business leaders were at the same time going like this. Because by the way, Scott, I'm not sure about you, but I have never heard an executive say, hold on, wait, can you come back when you have 5 more templates for me to fill out? No. They're not going to do that, right? So they don't care. They don't care about all those things. And I'm not saying you don't need good stuff, right? But it's really important to understand. And what I had to learn the hard way was I had to unlearn all the stuff that I had been told was the right way to do things, all the things you should do from a theoretical perspective, weren't matching my reality. My reality was we were always in situations where we had impatient stakeholders. That's been like forever, right? We had big stuff that we needed to deliver fast, and they wanted to know the fastest way to get there. Not because they were counting the deliverables, because they needed to get to an outcome. right? So when we stay so focused on measuring our value by the number of templates we create, the number of steps in our process, the number of methodologies we support, the number of projects we're managing, we're actually measuring the wrong data. We're measuring the wrong things. We're counting our value to the organization in the amount of things we're creating instead of the value we're helping the organization achieve, right? So for me, this light bulb went off when I finally went back to asking my stakeholders, why aren't you engaging with us? And they're like, because you're shoving a bunch of stuff at us that doesn't seem to be helping us achieve the outcome we're looking for now, right? So as a PMO leader, I had to learn that it's not that you throw out all templates, right? But you have to make sure that you're thinking about, how am I helping the organization achieve the goals that they have? And what am I doing to accelerate getting to that outcome, right? And that sometimes means we've got to stop measuring ourselves based on the number of deliverables we're creating, because by the way, that's just creating more stuff your stakeholders have to get through. And instead look at, how can we accelerate getting to the results, or as I call it, the impact factor or return on investment, right? And that's a whole nother thing people are really struggling with in this space, even especially when they're starting out. And Scott, especially if they've gotten their PMP, right?
Yeah.
We have been taught in PMP land, and I've had my PMP since 2004. We have been taught in PMP land that it's about inputs and outputs and tools and techniques. And all of that is super important as a foundational tool set to understand what you can possibly apply to a situation, but you don't need to apply it all at once. It's not about throwing everything you possibly can at the solution. It's about, what do I pull from that? What's important to take from here, and use just that, only that, to help me getting to that outcome the business leaders are looking for faster. Does that make sense?
I love it. I totally love it. I mean, that's why we share a brain, like, with this kind of whole thing. And like, I can imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, that like when someone makes the shift from outputs to outcomes, is the conversation from like day zero of initiating a project or a PMO, is the conversation different with the organization, with the sponsors, with the leadership?
Oh my gosh, it's a totally different conversation. And let me give you a very practical example, especially for those that have gotten their PMP. So you might hate me for bringing this up, but
don't hate me. We're the same. I don't talk about outputs at all. Or I mean, yeah, in the way. So we're good. We're good.
So EVM, or value management. What does the V stand for? Value. Do you know the one thing it doesn't actually tell you a darn thing about? Value, right? So you can take the triple constraint, time, scope, and cost. You can talk EVM, and you can shove all this language at your stakeholders. And you might have even trained them to ask, like, is it on time? Is it on budget? Because it's the only things they know to ask. It's the only way to engage in conversation with you about your project. But frankly, that doesn't tell the organization a darn thing about whether or not you should have done that project in the first place, whether or not along the way, just because you've spent money and it's taken time, doesn't mean you've actually achieved the outcomes the organization is looking for. You can spend, and here's a perfect example, Scott. Let's imagine that we've got this project team and they're working really hard to get all these deliverables done based on the scope that they've been given. And then the business comes to them and says, wait, we've got this other thing we really need to do in order for this project to be successful. And the response is, sorry, you can't get into the change control board for 3 months and and we're not going to get there. And before you know it, they're like frustrated because basically the whole first release of whatever this thing is a total waste. And it's not going to be until you get to version 2 before anyone's even going to buy it, use it, benefit from it, right? So you have just wasted the organization's time, energy, money, resources, and you've not gotten them any closer to getting to that outcome they need, because that outcome is the return on investment for the investment they made. And by the way, every single one of you, if you don't believe that you are financially responsible, then you're missing the boat, because what you are to your organization is an investment manager. They are investing time, money, and resources in helping you achieve and helping the organization achieve an outcome. And your job is to do whatever you can to accelerate getting to that outcome as quickly as possible, getting to that return on investment as quickly as possible. And that's a thing, Scott, I think that We don't realize, right? I didn't realize early in my project management career, but I tell all of my project managers and PMO leaders, they're investment managers for the organization. That is their job, is to ensure that that it was worth doing in the first place. And so even if, this is about the time that but monster crawls up onto your shoulder and says, yeah, but we don't measure ROI here. And let me just tell you, your business leaders do. I don't care what kind of an organization you're working in. I've had nonprofit leaders, people at high ranking in the government, and all, of course, commercial organizations. Every single one of them talks ROI. And so if we want to be thought of like business leaders, Scott, we have to know, like, it's great to have your PMP. It's great to have the body of knowledge language. It's great to have the tool set, but we have to know how to stop talking PM speak at our business leaders and start talking like business leaders ourselves, if we want to get and keep our seat at the table in the real conversations happening about the future of the organization, right? So it does absolutely change your whole thinking about how you talk about the work that you're doing. If instead of geeking out like we love to do on all of our project management stuff, instead, if we really understand and uncover the pain point the business leaders are experiencing, the opportunity that's being presented, and carry that language of why we're there doing that work in the first place, and thread that through the entire project and every conversation you're having with not just the stakeholders, but the people doing the work. Do you know, Scott, that 95% of this totally freaked me out. 95% of an organization's staff does not understand the strategy of the organization.
Jesus. I believe it. As a dude that's building a business, I'm like a challenger that every day. It's like, does everybody understand? Does everybody understand? So changing your mindset, like even at that incremental level and aligning with the big guys, like, and girls, like, I guess that helps get from 95 to 92, or like, how does it help? Like
so here's the thing. So here's an example. One time I was working in an organization that really needed help with their PMO, and they had all these projects going on, and they're all customer facing. And when I asked them what's the priority of these projects, they said, because they couldn't even produce a full list, like, here's all our clients. They said, what do you think they said when I asked the priority?
What would they say? I love the fact you asked me.
They're all important. They're all important. Exactly. They're all number one, right?
Yeah.
Said, okay, so we have unlimited time, unlimited resources, et cetera. Like, no, we don't have that. So over the next several months, we spent time, we started with a whiteboard. You don't need a fancy tool for this. What's the list of initiatives? What's the order of priority? What's the things we have going on here? Who's working on them, et cetera? Got that into a spreadsheet and did something wild and crazy, Scott. We exposed it to everybody that was working on the projects.
Wow.
Insane, right? So people could, and this is, again, back in the day, I date myself. I had a dashboard on my door, like right by my door of my office, that showed the whole portfolio of initiatives, how they were doing, red, yellow, green, in priority order, who was working on them, where they were stuck, et cetera. And it completely changed the way every person that was even remotely close to being involved in those projects behaved. Because now people on the team understood why it was so important for them to prioritize certain projects over others, where they were in their cycle. Developers were making changes to their day based on why these projects were so important, what they needed from them. And then they were deciding, okay, well, this one's in red, I'm going to focus on this one first, right? So understanding why you're doing what you're doing and connecting to that overall strategy doesn't have to be some, rainbows and unicorns kind of a conversation. It can be, this matters. Here's how you're connected to it. Here's the outcome we're going to achieve, right? If you change the conversation, not to just, here's the deliverables and the due dates, but we start talking about why this is moving the organization forward, what jobs this is saving, what new clients this is going to help us get, what revenue this is going to generate, what jobs, will be improved as a result of this, the employee morale of the organizational change. You'll be able to make Bobby's soccer game at night, like, make it real for people about why the work they're doing matters. And you don't get there by talking about how fancy your deliverables are. You get there by talking about the impact you're going to make on the organization or with your clients as a result of being a part of this solution, right? So it's not going from 95 to 92%. Imagine if every single person, because in this organization, the people that answered the phones changed their behavior. They weren't on any of the projects, but they changed their behavior because if one of the clients called and it was one of these high priority clients, and they would make stuff happen, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you go from 95% not knowing to most of it to the other way around, like
Yeah.
completely flip it. Almost everybody in the organization knows why they're there, how they fit into the puzzle of delivering on that organization strategy. And then everyone thinks differently. They treat it like a business. Instead of figuring out how we can perfect our deliverables, they start thinking of, like, you know what I'm talking about, the reports that are like 16 pages that you had 14 review
Yeah.
meetings
And then every
on.
month you like, was
Yeah.
this last month's report or this month's report? I have no idea. Like, I don't know what's,
Exactly. So
yeah.
ask Lee Lambert to tell you the story about the hand truck he had to use for a status report he used to do. It's a hilarious story.
Jesus. Yeah.
So anyway, so what we're able to do is have people, instead of spending so much time perfecting the wrong things, they're asking different questions. How can we streamline, optimize? How can we move faster through this process so we get to that outcome, that return on investment faster? Because the longer something takes to do, your return just shrinks. Every day you're having to spend energy on it. So I encourage people to, because you're not so focused on perfecting outputs, and I'm not saying do bad work, right? This isn't about poor quality. This is about being laser focused on the things that are going to drive the outcomes the fastest. So instead of focusing on, the some of those deliverables that we've made 25 pages that nobody's reading anyway, but we did 14 review meetings, so we should present it, and then you give it to your stakeholders and they're not looking at it anyway, right? But instead of doing all of that, we say, how is every template, every step in the process, every meeting I'm holding, getting us to an action or a decision and accelerating our way through this project, right? Like, that's a totally different mindset. And here's the cool thing, Scott, and I've seen this with thousands of students in our programs. When you do this, when you shift your language, when you shift the conversation, when you speak business instead of expecting them to speak project, what happens is your business leaders start taking notice. They start paying attention to you more because you're speaking their language. You're meeting them where they are and taking them on the journey of where they need to go, right? So it's just by changing your thinking process from outputs to outcomes that you start to see the world through a completely different lens. And it doesn't just affect you as a PMO leader, as a project manager, et cetera. It affects everybody you're talking to, because now the people on the project team, it has this force multiplier effect of everybody around you hearing different language. They see you differently and they start behaving differently as well. So it really positions us in our project management field to let go of the stigma of being administrative overhead and really showing the value, the impact we can make. Because there is no other profession more uniquely qualified to change the world than project management and the PMO as a facilitator, as an impact engine of that change. That's literally what we live and breathe, Scott. And you are in this cool position where you are enabling our next generation of project managers. And the reason I work with you because we partner with my clients on your PMP program is because of the way you talk about what they need to learn and then contextualize it, put it in the bigger picture of, now here's how this applies to the real world and how you make sure you don't get stuck in just focusing on inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, but focusing on how that connects to your ability to deliver on the organization strategy.
Love it. Laura, as you were talking, like, I could see a vision of like a company just like unthawing in my head of like the way you're doing this, of like having a person out there. It seems like such a freeing perspective. You're having better conversations. You're empowering people. You're making, you said like treat it like a business. It made me feel like a family business. Like that it was like, it doesn't, like it said, that NASA thing back in the day with like the dudes sweeping the floor and they say like JFK or something came by and was like, hey, what are you doing? And like, I'm putting a man on the moon. Exactly. And it's like, that's essentially what you're telling us is like, dude, you can do that for everybody.
Exactly. And it's magic when you see it working. It's just this symbiotic relationship between all of the parts of the organization working together to achieve something bigger than they can, than themselves. And it doesn't have to be putting a man on the moon, but it can be serving your clients in a meaningful way. And it could be anything. If you can get everybody behind it and understanding their role, right? Like the janitor sweeping the floors, they just need to understand how they're connected to it. And just creating that connection can create such an emotional attachment to getting to the results, as opposed to feeling like we have to define our success by the wrong numbers, right?
Yeah.
By the steps we're taking in a process, right? It's not, more is not better in this scenario. It's all, and the same thing applies, by the way, at the executive level, when they're like, okay, well, let's do 683 projects this year and let's start them all at once, right? Well, hello. That's why you're not getting the results, right? So they're not perfect either, right? There's a lot of lessons to be learned there, but they don't know what they don't know. And it's our responsibility. It's our fiduciary responsibility to the organization to help, what I call be the strategy navigator for the organization, navigate people through the process of delivering on their strategy in the highest impact way possible, which is as quickly as possible. Doesn't mean as much stuff at once as possible, right?
This is truly amazing. I love what you're talking about. I think you've given people very actionable things that they can do. And they now understand about, like, when they step into work tomorrow or after lunch or whatever, it's like, I've got to shift my mind. I've got to be this. And if I think what you've laid out is a beautiful path, and if they follow it, man, it's going to be better tomorrow. So
yeah, well, and it can be very, so just to make it super simple.
Yeah.
You can ask one word, one question. Why? Why are we doing what we're doing? And if you can't answer that question, that's the place you need to start. And sometimes, and I've had some people come to me and say, I can't get my business leaders to explain why we're doing these projects. Well, that's where you stop and you say, you know what? We can't move forward and do this justice without understanding why we're doing what we're doing. This is in the form of a business case, not a 65-page business case, a 1-page business case. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? What's the impact we expect to achieve as a result of this? The outcome, right? And what does success look like? I mean, this is a few questions. You just have to ask some basic questions. And if you don't have it on your existing projects, go ask those questions now. And and just go have conversations with your stakeholders. Ask what matters to them. Ask what they care about. Ask, what keeps them up at night. The answers to those questions and putting into action what you've learned in those questions will change your organization, will change your project, it will change your perspective, and it will change how people see you in the organization. And it happens really quickly. You just have to be willing to get out of your bubble, right? Of like the safety of all the stuff we know, right? We know this, the project management stuff, and that's why we geek out on it. So it is pretty cool, right? And we have to know that we don't want to get stuck in that bubble of the project management stuff. We have to understand how what we're doing influences the outcomes of the organization. And it just starts with a very simple question of why, and a shift of a mindset from defining our value in outputs and instead defining our value in the outcomes we achieve for the organization.
Couldn't say, I got nothing. It just doesn't get any better than that. Like, all right, so go ask why. People go, do it. And then tell Laura how it goes. Laura.
Yes, please do. Let me know.
All right. Thank you very much, Laura. This will not be the last time we talk. I'm a better person for our chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. It's such a pleasure.